I remember exactly the day everything changed for me. It was a Tuesday, mid-afternoon, sitting on the living room floor with an open cardboard box, half my things scattered across the carpet. You know that kind of silence that weighs heavily? I looked at the wedding photos, that stupid smile on my face, and I felt like a clown. But it wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. I discovered that Lucas had been stringing me along for years, hiding debts, using my name in things I didn't even know about. When I opened the bank account and saw the negative balance, all I could do was laugh. You know that laugh that hurts? Because it didn't make sense. I'd always worked, always helped out around the house. And yet there I was, at 30, screwed, alone, and feeling like the most idiotic woman in the world. I won't lie, I thought about giving up that day. I thought about calling him, begging for help, asking what I did wrong. But then I saw a message he'd sent to his lover calling her my safe haven. That gave me a moment. I thought, what am I then? The old, leaky buoy he used while waiting for the boat to arrive? At that moment, I stopped crying. I got up, ripped up all the photos, closed the box, and decided that no one would make me feel that small again. I still didn't know how I was going to do it, but one thing was certain. I was going to get out of that hole without asking anyone for a favor. Not him, not the family that disappeared when everything fell apart. For the next few days, I was on autopilot. I finished packing everything, rented a tiny room in the back of a lady's house I'd found through the neighborhood group. No furniture, nothing fancy, just a mattress on the floor, an old laptop, and my cell phone. And yet, I felt a strange relief. It was as if for the first time in years I had control of my own life, even if I was starting from scratch. I didn't have much, but I had myself, and that was more than I'd had in a long time. I went days without being able to eat properly. I lost a ton of weight, but I also started sleeping better, because at least I no longer had to fake happiness. The real breakthrough came when I received a message from an old friend offering me a freelance job. It was simple, helping with social media for a small store. At first, I considered turning it down because I felt like crap, lacking any confidence, but I accepted. Each day I did a little more, studying on YouTube, reading articles, staying up all night, watching videos of people who'd started from nothing. I saw a lot of motivational stuff that seemed like nonsense, but I clung to it because it was all I had. And when I got the first payment, it was small, but it was mine. I cried. I really cried. But this time it wasn't out of anger. It was out of pride. After that first freelance gig, I kind of got addicted to chasing it. I started offering my services to every group, created an Instagram profile just for work, struck up conversations with shop owners, cake sellers, manicurists. I offered my help to anyone who needed it. There were days when I thought it was crazy, that I should just find a real job, clock in, and forget about trying to do it alone. But then I remembered what it was like to depend on others, Lucas treating me like a burden, the humiliations I'd endured trying to save that marriage, and that gave me more strength. I didn't always get clients, I struggled, but I never again accepted hearing, "It's not for you." One day, I took on a seemingly trivial job, creating a logo for a woman who made fitness meals. I knew nothing about design, but I spent nights practicing on a free app, delivered the logo, and she loved it. She recommended it to someone else, then another, and before I knew it, I was becoming someone's role model. I, who had been called useless at home, who had heard from my own ex that I didn't have the entrepreneurial profile, started earning more than I imagined. And the best part, I could work. From my own little corner, without relying on anyone, just my own effort. It was exhausting, but for the first time, I felt I had some value, that I could be my own boss. I clearly remember the day I managed to save my first 1,000 rials without having to answer to anyone. It was a Friday, and I had finished a large art package for a new store downtown. I went to the market to buy some junk to celebrate. Simple things like snacks, chocolate, and I sat in the car looking at that receipt on my phone, trembling. Because it wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't that broken woman, that I could rebuild myself from nothing. I returned to my little room feeling that for the first time in a long time, I was respecting myself. I might be broke, I might have no furniture, but I had something no amount of money can buy, restored dignity. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were many setbacks. There were days when I cried alone in the bathroom, because a client disappeared without paying, or because I saw a photo of Lucas with his new girlfriend enjoying a trip while I was killing myself working. There were times when anger consumed everything, but I began to realize the difference was that now I felt the pain and didn't just sit still. I had a reason to get out of bed every day. I had a focus, and little by little sadness gave way to pride, because I looked around, no matter how simple my life was, and everything there was achieved, with my own hands. I began to like the woman I saw in the mirror. The turning point came when a client recommended me for a larger project, something I never imagined I'd get. It was a company looking for someone to handle social media, marketing, and visual identity creation. I was terrified, almost turned them down, but I took a deep breath and agreed, even though I was terrified. I spent all night studying, making mistakes, redoing. There was one night I cried over my laptop because nothing seemed good enough. I felt like a fraud, but I delivered, and the feedback was incredible. They praised me, paid me correctly, and even recommended me to other companies. It was the first time I felt like I was building something real, a reputation, a name in the market. With the money from this project, I was able to rent a decent apartment, still small, but mine. I bought a real bed, a desk, a decent chair to work in. And I remember the first night I slept there. It felt like I was in a 5-star hotel, even though everything was simple. I cried, hugging my pillow, but it was a good cry. I remembered the days I slept on the old mattress, listening to Lucas's audio message belittling me, telling me I'd never make it on my own. And there, that night, I knew I'd already won, even if I hadn't achieved everything yet, because I'd freed myself from that voice that told me I wasn't enough. Little by little, word of mouth started working, and I started closing more deals. I set up a CNPJ, Brazilian Corporate Taxpayer Registry, something I'd never imagined. I, who always thought I needed someone to help me, found myself creating proposals, contracts, issuing invoices, talking to major clients. It was surreal. I remember a client asking me if I owned a company or worked alone, and I said, "Yes, I do." And that came out of my mouth with such pride that I got emotional afterward. Because until recently, I was the woman left with nothing, cast out, treated like a wretch. And there, I was in charge of my own story. I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, but I was proving to myself that I was capable. Of course, not everything was perfect. There was a lot of stress, sleepless nights, difficult clients, work I redid 1,000 times. But I started to create my own routine, with my own time, my own way. I invested in online courses, bought a better laptop with installments, and kept improving. I even started turning down low-paying jobs, something I never imagined doing. I was the one who accepted any scrap, who was afraid to say no. Today, I choose who I work with. And the craziest thing? I started helping other women who were going through similar things. Not as a coach or anything forced, but by offering tips, helping with what I learned the hard way. I saw that my suffering wasn't in vain. I became a real example that it's possible to start over. One of the most symbolic moments for me was when I bought my first car with company money. It wasn't new. It was used, simple, but it was mine, without depending on anyone. I remember parking it in front of my apartment and staring at it for minutes, remembering how many times I had to ask Lucas or someone else for a ride because he said it wasn't worth it for me to drive. Better save money, he'd say, but deep down, it was control. He liked seeing me trapped, dependent on him even to go to the grocery store. And now I had freedom. I could come and go as I pleased, chart my own path without having to answer to anyone. Few people understand how liberating this is after years of being suffocated. As the months passed, not only did my finances improve, but my head began to feel lighter. I started therapy, something I'd always put off doing. I faced my insecurities head-on and understood why I'd been so self-defeating in relationships. It was hard to admit, but I'd let a lot of things slide, accepting scraps thinking they were love. And I won't romanticize it. To this day, there are moments when I feel angry, when I remember everything I went through and want to scream. But I've also learned not to let it consume me. Today, I transform this pain into energy to grow even more. Each victory of mine is like a silent response to everything that once made me believe I couldn't do it. The most shocking turnaround was when I hit my first 6-figure income of the year. I had to check my statements several times, redo the math, because it seemed like a lie. I, who left with nothing, who was embarrassed to tell others that I lived in the backyard of a lady's house, was now earning more than many entrepreneurs I admired online. It wasn't just the money, it was what it represented. Every penny was proof of my effort, of the sleepless nights, the times I cried over my laptop, the rejections I received, the closed doors. I didn't get anything handed to me. I fought for every opportunity. And I won't pretend it was easy, because it wasn't. But it was the best thing I did for myself. After this milestone, a lot changed. I started traveling alone, something I'd previously been terrified of. I took my first international trip, a simple thing, but I felt like the freest woman in the world. I, who was judged for staying close to Lucas, for accepting cheating, for being submissive, now got to know other countries, other cultures, with my own money, paying for each ticket with my work. And that's when I truly understood the meaning of freedom. It's not about money or ostentation. It's about being able to make your own decisions without fear, being able to build your life your way, without having to prove anything to anyone. That's what I'd always sought and never achieved when I was trapped in a marriage full of lies. One day, Lucas messaged me after years of not speaking. He'd seen my company on social media, seen my results, and came up with that "I always knew you were special" line, trying to strike up a conversation, wanting to meet up for coffee. I didn't respond. I just looked at that message and thought about how many times I'd humiliated myself trying to save that relationship while he cheated on me, lied, and made me look like a fool. And for the first time, I felt zero desire to respond. It wasn't about revenge, it was about indifference. He no longer had any power over me, no control, no importance. And that feeling was more valuable than any money I'd ever earned. It was living proof of my resilience. Today I look back and it gives me a lump in my throat remembering everything I went through, but it also gives me immense satisfaction to see how far I've come. There are still difficult days, I still struggle with insecurities, I still make mistakes, but I'm no longer that dull, self-deficient woman who accepted crumbs thinking they were the best she could get. I rediscovered myself, reinvented myself, and even after everything, I managed to get back on my feet. I always thought the end of my marriage was the end of my life, but I was completely wrong. It was just the beginning of the best phase of my life. And today, every time I close a deal, every achievement I achieve, it's as if I'm saying to my past self, "You survived, you won." There are people who look at my life now and think it was luck, that things just worked out for me. No one sees what's behind the scenes. No one knows the times I cried quietly so my neighbor wouldn't hear, the times I ate ramen noodles for a week waiting for my paycheck to come in. No one sees. The weight of starting over from scratch with no support, no family nearby, no one to hold your hand when everything falls apart. And that's why I say it shamelessly. I deserved every victory. I built it all alone, without shortcuts, without help, without relying on any man. And there's no better feeling than knowing that every achievement is the result of my courage, of my persistence when all seemed lost. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that no one will come and save you. No one will see your potential if you don't have the courage to believe in it yourself. I spent years thinking I needed saving, that I was weak, that I needed a relationship to validate me. And it was at the lowest point in my life that I discovered the woman I truly am. Strong, determined, capable of rebuilding everything from nothing. I'm no exception. Any woman who decides to prioritize herself can do it. It won't be easy. They'll judge you, they'll try to belittle you, but in the end, the freedom of being the master of your own life makes up for everything. And today I say this with pride, because I experienced it firsthand and transformed my story. And you know the craziest thing? I, who was always terrified of being alone, learned to love my own company. Before, I was that person who avoided silence, always needing someone around. Today, I insist on my moments of peace. I love going out alone, having coffee, doing my own thing without needing anyone to consult with me. I rediscovered myself in this process. I discovered tastes I didn't even know I had. I threw myself into hobbies I'd never tried before. And this was as important as professional success. Because the money is incredible, of course, but nothing beats the feeling of being at peace with who you are without needing to please or conform to anyone. When I look at old photos, I see Angel faded, insecure, trapped in a marriage that only sucked the best out of me. And I want to hug that version of myself and say, hold, on tight, you'll get through this. Because today, I know firsthand that rock bottom is just part of the journey, not the final destination. I'm not just a survivor of my worst phase. I'm living proof that it's possible to rise from the ashes. Today, I'm the woman I always wanted to be, and more. I'm the woman he said I could never become. And you know what? That's the best revenge possible. Living happily, freely, and successfully. If there's one thing I always make a point of remembering, it's that my story is anything but a fairy tale. It wasn't a straight line. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't quick. There was a lot of loneliness, shame, sleepless nights, fear of not being able to cope. There were months of insecurity, of feeling like everything would fall apart at any moment. But I resisted, even on the worst days. I chose not to give up, even when everything told me to give up. And that's why today I value every achievement. Because I know what I went through to get here. And every time I look in the mirror, I see a woman who was kicked to the ground and got back up on her own. And that's priceless. For anyone reading this who feels like they're at rock bottom, I can say with absolute certainty, no one will understand your pain like you do. No one will root for you more than you. And that's okay. Don't expect support from those who brought you down. Don't expect understanding from those who've never experienced what you've been through. Do it for yourself, even when you're scared, even when you're tired, even when you don't know what's next. Because later on, when you win, when you look back and see everything you've overcome, the feeling will be indescribable. You'll feel such intense pride that no judgment, no criticism, no bad memory will be able to erase it. And that's what I achieved. The freedom to be the master of my life. Today, I'm no longer the woman who cowers when someone belittles me. I'm no longer the one who bows her head to maintain peace in a relationship that only existed on the surface. I've become the strongest, most authentic version of myself. It took time, it hurt, but it was worth every second. I understood that my life didn't need to follow any script, that I didn't have to please my family, my husband, or society. My commitment is to myself, to the woman I promised never to abandon. And it's this woman who guides me every day. Strong, free, happy, unafraid to start from scratch as many times as necessary. And I don't say this to sound like a perfect example, because I'm not. I make mistakes. I have crises. I still have days when I'm insecure. But today I know how to get back up much faster. I know how to shield myself from people who drain me. I know how to recognize red flags from afar. And if someone asks me what my greatest gain was after the end of that marriage, I'd answer without thinking twice. My peace. My success is important, but nothing surpasses the peace I feel today. Sleeping peacefully, waking up, excited to live my life, being able to decide every step without depending on anyone. That's priceless. And that's what I wish for any woman who's been destroyed by an abusive relationship. Freedom and peace. And I know there are still people who will look at my story and try to belittle it, say it was luck, that it was a good time in the market, that I turned things around because I'm young or because I'm privileged. And you know what? I don't even bother responding anymore. Those who only see the results and don't know the path I've taken have no opinion that interests me. I know myself. I know where I came from. I know the mess I had to clean up from my own life. And that alone is enough. I'm not here to prove anything to anyone. I'm here living the life I fought to build. If anyone wants to be inspired, I share everything, unfiltered. If anyone wants to judge, let them judge. I'm on my way. When I look in the mirror today, I see a whole woman. A woman who won't settle for less than she deserves, who won't bow down to any man, who doesn't depend on anyone's approval to feel good. I've learned that we don't have to be strong all the time, but we do need to be true to ourselves. And that's who I am today. True to my essence, my dreams, my achievements. And the greatest lesson I leave for those reading this is this. There's no age limit to start over. No rock bottom is definitive. No mistake can define you forever. As long as you have the strength to get out of bed, you have the strength to change your life. I'm living proof of that. Today, looking back on everything I've built, I feel like that old version of me has been buried forever. Not in a bad way, but in a necessary way. I had to die in several parts to be reborn stronger. The angel who accepted less, who blamed herself for other people's mistakes, who carried a failed marriage on her shoulders, that angel no longer exists. I am the woman who started over from scratch, who was embarrassed, who swallowed her pride, who heard no until she got used to it, but who never again let anyone control her life. And I say this because if I can climb out of a seemingly bottomless hole, anyone can too. No one needs to be trapped in a bad relationship. No one needs to settle for less than they deserve.